What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Swing Sunday Scan for May 22nd, 2022. The plan today is we're going to look over the markets, try to get an idea of our bias on the direction for the market for the week to come. We're going to look at some previous ideas, and we're going to get into some new ideas also. But before we jump into the markets, if any of this content helps you out in any way, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Click that bell and you'll get notifications anytime I post new content. Let's get to it. All right, guys, we're looking at the S&P 500 E-mini futures, the ES. You can also look at the SPY, which is the S&P 500 ETF. I prefer to look at the futures for the market because I believe it trades a lot smoother. Last week, we were talking about how on May the 13th, we put in a decent green bar, which could be an indication of a further bounce, which if it were to bounce and extend, we were expecting to start getting into some shorts after an extension to the upside. If the market were to stay above this 3850 area and above, we would likely be sticking with a bias that the market was going to bounce and prepare for some shorts. However, we kind of got a mixed bag of both and just kind of chopped sideways. Initially, we were bouncing on the 17th, but we engulfed a lot of the trading to the downside for the last 3 to 4 days. And we peekabooed below that 3850 area we were talking about and has since closed above it, but somewhat near it. So given what happened last week, again, I'm pretty neutral towards the long and the short side. And really the plan going forward is waiting for the market to put in some kind of extension to go heavy on either side. Right now, my portfolio is 50-50 with 3 longs, 3 shorts. We're positioned pretty good for any direction the market will go in the week to come. We are currently in stocks that show relative weakness for the shorts and relative strength for the longs. So we're positioned pretty good. I'm probably not going to be getting into any new stocks in the week to come, but I have a bunch of decent ideas that could shape up in 2 to 3 weeks. So we're going to prepare and manage out the trades that we currently have. Before we jump into some of my open positions, I just want to point out how sweet this play would have been on the SPY or the S&P 500 on a sell setup. If you took the S&P short, once it broke the lows on this weekly candle here with the risk just above the top of the wick, man, what a trade. So basically, if you were to take that trade and exit somewhere near the bottom of this candle here, it was basically like a 4R trade. Some of the great things about trading the market is you don't have to necessarily worry about gaps as much. It trades quite smooth and you don't have to worry about earnings. So something that we haven't done this year at all is trade the market. One reason that I don't like doing it that often is because it does chew up a lot of buying power if you trade the SPY, but it is completely okay and actually a great idea sometimes to trade the market either as just a singular trade or a way to hedge against having a portfolio that might be heavy on either the long or the short side. So I just wanted to point that out before we go to my current open positions. Last week I mentioned RYLB. I was in this trade last week with a stop at around 1178. And on this wick here, I got stopped out on May the 18th. I was very highly considering getting back in, but I held back. If you remember last week, I was talking about thinking that I was maybe getting a little bit too impatient and getting into too many stocks on the short side without waiting for an extension on the market. So I held back mainly for that reason. There's 2 other reasons why I stayed out of this one. One being this is a very flat top and it's holding the lows pretty good. So in some ways, this doesn't fit my pattern in terms of a reversal pattern. If you look here, this one reversed really well and headed in the right direction. This one is kind of trading in a box, and in some ways, this looks like this could break out and continue going higher. So that's one reason. The second reason is we're trading this one into what looks to be like approaching zero. As stocks get closer and closer to zero, their range on their daily trading ranges get smaller and smaller. And really to expect this to go from $10 all the way to $4 is really like a huge feat for a stock to do. I mean, it's put in a decent move here, but as it approaches zero, this kind of move in this area becomes harder and harder to do. So I didn't really feel good about taking this one. I liked the shorts that I was already in and figured I'd look for other quality shorts rather than getting into this one. So this one, full stop for me. On to the next. ARW. This one was so close to stopping out on May the 17th here on that green day. We're literally pennies away, about 21 cents. But thank goodness we put in a huge red bar on Friday, which hopefully is a sign of continued momentum for the rest of the week. I currently have my target at 3R. If we put in some really decent wide range bars at the beginning of next week, I might be looking at taking half at 3R and then see if I can get a bigger move on the rest. We have a lot of room down here. If you look on the monthly, all the way down to $60. I don't think I'd be willing to hold it for that long. But even here on the weekly, if we were to break below this pivot here, we could easily see a move to $100 if we have a decent momentum. So after this red bar, feeling much better about this. But again, anything can happen in trading. This is still a potential for a full stop out at any point, but so far looking pretty good. PTSI, this was one that we felt really great about getting into last week. Put in a decent move on Wednesday with a wide range red bar. We're about 1.5 R right now. Lots of room to earnings. Possibly going to take half around the $24 mark just because we have a pivot here. But again, like the last one, if we see momentum, we have lots of room down all the way to $16 really, if you look here on the weekly chart. So we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll take half here. I'm supposed to take half at 3R, but if I let it ride and trail it out as I go, then maybe we can get a bigger piece on the rest of this move. Another trade that I am open is SCSC. This is what I talked about potentially canceling last week. This week, it broke above my stop, which canceled the trade, but what it was doing after the trade was canceled, I kind of liked. It gave me an opportunity for an entry with a better risk to reward. So I ended up taking this one. The quality on this one's not super great. We are about break even at the moment. We did peekaboo below the entry for a little while on Friday. We do have quite a bit of room to earnings, so we can kind of let this one work. So we'll see what happens. That's it for my shorts. On to my longs. I took ESTA long. We're kind of heading into this support area here. Last week I was talking about a big risk to reward all the way to the top of this pivot, but again, because it puts in such a big move down to the support area, I'm more expecting this to get around the 50% range. Likely be taking at least a piece, maybe a third around the $70 mark and maybe another third around 80, and then maybe try to ride the rest out somewhere in this topping tail here. But so far we're a bit in the green on this one. Nothing crazy. This one's going to take some time, so we're just going to have to be patient with this one. We put in a tiny little pivot here, so if we break above the $64 area, I'll likely move my stop up to the 55.12 cent area, but we will see what happens next week. FMC, this one got off to a decent start, especially on May the 19th. We put in a pretty wide range green bar. The next day we gapped up above the highs of that bar, but then put in a crazy engulfing bar with a bottoming tail. So kind of, it's like the stock doesn't really know what it wants to do, but we'll see what happens. Similar to the last one, if we break above this red bar here, even though this isn't really quite a pivot, because it kind of came and tested this area and got gobbled up by buyers, I might be willing to just raise my stop up to here and try to avoid any more crazy moves on this stock, but we'll see. TNP, this one I was kind of taking a chance on last week. If you remember, I was looking at an entry on this on the daily, but basing the thesis on the higher time frames on the weekly and the monthly. We're so close to earnings on this one, so this one really has to get moving next week to get even close to my target. I mean, look how far we are away, but I mean, it has put in some decent moves along the way, so we'll see. Maybe we're gobbling up some sellers and the buyers are just getting positioned to really rally on this, but who knows. We have about 17 trading days left before I got to exit, so we got about 3 weeks. So we'll let this one work and see what happens. Last week we mentioned HALO. This one actually continued moving in the direction that we thought it would. It broke slightly this pivot here. So if you were trading a 2R position, taking this trade over the highs of these 2 to 3 bars here and target at the top of this pivot, you would have hit target. I stayed away from this one because I was talking about this little potential bounce and failure here. I wasn't a huge fan of that, so I stayed away. Plus the risk to reward, I like to stick with 3 to 1. And this one didn't have 3 to 1 at the top of this pivot, but decent little trade. No regrets missing it, but happy this one worked out. FTS was another one that I mentioned. Not great risk to reward, and actually just completely missed this one. Didn't see this one before it triggered. Talked about maybe taking it on a double bottom, but never really did that. And on Friday, it put in another decent green bar, which looks like this is poised to break through this $65 area. Nothing really to do here, but an interesting one to watch as a potential entry in the future. Maybe we get a breakout through this $65 area, we get an extension, and I'd be salivating for a pullback back towards one of these moving averages with a smooth retracement, and taking this on a long joining trend on this one. This is an energy stock. Energy's been doing really well. It is pretty extended on the weekly, but getting extended on a trend is not as bad as getting extended on just a few bars. So as long as it's trending, we're getting highs and lows, I wouldn't shy away from taking this on the next dip. LOPE is a potential entry for next week. Last week I was talking about how this stock trades really choppily and very overlapping, which is a recipe for getting shooken out. So what my plan was basically to look at what the weekly bar does, and it's done something interesting. So we put in a narrow range bar, which gives us about a 2R risk to reward about to the top of this pivot, and a 3R is just above it. So I'd be possibly looking at taking this one long or above this topping tail here, and you can see this stock has done kind of exactly what I was talking about it could do. So my entry would normally have been above this red bar here, and what it did is it broke above it. It put in a wide range red bar but with a topping tail, and then it came back down, and we basically put in 6 bars just overlapping, getting really close to the risk or the stop area. So I think it was really the right move to wait for the weekly bar to form before we decide to get in the stock. Whether or not I get into it is we will see, but there is a great pivot here that this can use as a support area. The risk to reward is wider, so we don't have to worry so much about getting chopped out of this. Risk to reward to get to target isn't super great, given that it has a long way to go. But I mean, if you look at the move here, it put in a good, $78 to $100. That's nearly a, just over $20 move. We're expecting this to go, $15. So decent idea. Whether we get in it or not, we'll see. RBA is another one that we mentioned, looking at a potential further extension on this with a retrace down to the $76 area. It's already pulling in, and I don't like that. I would have rather have liked this to see this extend further, maybe even to like the $85 area, and then next week or the week after look for a smooth pullback. This is not ideal. Like this, there's no risk to reward to the top of this little tiny pivot here. So yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna continue watching this, but no opportunity for me on this one as of yet. NOMD, we were hoping on this name to see a further extension, possibly into the $22 area, somewhere between the 21 and 22 with some narrow range bars, but instead we got some narrow range bars just under the $21 area. Wasn't a huge fan of this. I mean, risk to reward is really great, but I do like entering in on narrow bars, but for some reason looking at this, it's almost like it's too narrow. After such a big 3 wide range green bars, these bars were just too narrow for me. I felt like we were just going to get chopped out too easily. My entry would have been on this red bar here, on the lows there, and we still would be in this stock. And I mean, really, if this goes all the way to the bottom of this pivot, which would be around where target is, I mean, I might be kicking myself, but this one didn't feel right. And you know, this kind of pop, although extended, and we do look for extension, is not quite smooth. I mean, it just didn't look right. There's something not quite right with this pattern. So I'll likely ignore this one, especially because we're already in 3 shorts, and I just can't quite pinpoint why this one doesn't feel right at the moment. So on to the next. CPNG, this one got no extension. This one would have been great if we saw an extension up into this area. I would still consider this one if we put in a big pop into this area, even after this kind of choppy sideways action here. But as of right now, no trade for me. On to the next. All right, let's get into some new ideas. SCSC. This one I'm looking at as a potential idea long. If you've watched some of the other videos, the theme is pretty similar across the board. Saw a breakthrough, pop, and a retracement down to what was a resistance area and now becoming support. These retracement bars are looking pretty smooth. This last one is way too wide at the moment. So in order for this one to get good, we need to see some narrow range bars and possibly a couple of them along the way before we can look at entering this one. So this one's not ready yet, but could be ready next week or the week after. We're going to watch this one for an entry. HURN, again, saw a breakthrough over this, what was a resistance area, which could now become a support area. Not ready yet, but if we see a decline, a retracement into this support area here with some narrow range bars, I'd be looking at it for a potential reversal up towards the $60 area and the top of this pivot going long. EXLS, if you look at the daily chart and if you watch some of the previous videos, this retracement sucks, like really bad. So normally I would have ignored this. However, I was looking more at the weekly chart, and even on the weekly chart, not great. But look what this has done last time. It hit the red 50 period moving average on the weekly chart. It rallied for a good 6 weeks. So similar to LOPE, where I'm going to wait and see what happens on the weekly bars. I'm going to wait this one out for a couple weeks. I'm just going to watch this really patiently. I don't feel like getting in this one for any reason on the daily chart, but if the weekly chart gives me a reason, I might be looking at getting in this one long in maybe a month or so. That's it for the longs. Here are some short ideas. BL. This one, we saw a really decent extension. However, beware, the volume is increasing, which could mean that there is a lot of buying interest. And you could look at this and say, well, that looks really bullish, and you could be right. However, this stock has been declining on the weekly chart for a long time. So it's been very relatively weak to the market. And even here, we saw a decent increase in volume. Not so much a increase in price, and it just has continued down since then. Now we're seeing a volume and a movement in price, so definitely that could be a sign of bullishness. However, we're heading into a resistance area here. I'd be definitely interested in taking a short on this one. If we put some narrow range bars in this area, looking for a move and reversal to the downside, and that's BL. FICO, this we have looked at in the past. Here is a trade idea where we were looking at, on the weekly chart, a really great short entry. This one actually looks quite a bit like PTSI, where we put in sort of like a sideways action, and then on the weekly we broke through and a reversal back into the underside. FICO put in a similar kind of move where there was this kind of box up here, broke through, it retraced, and then we looked at taking a short here. However, it was heading into earnings, and then after earnings it put in a huge spike, and so we never got in this one, and we just kind of left it alone. I actually took it off my watch list, and because what it was doing up here I wasn't a huge fan on. But what a trade that would have been, taking the lows of one of the weekly bars. Really, my entry would have been on this red bar here. I would have took the lows there, entry up here, and on the weekly, what a move. I mean, we could have exited right before earnings. This would have been a 3-hour trade easily. So again, I probably, even looking at it now, it's not really my type of pattern, so I don't think I would have got into this even looking at it now. I mean, still not a great pattern, but what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna look for another possible entry on the weekly as it extends, and maybe we'll see an entry maybe sometime after earnings. So this one, again, we're not gonna necessarily look at this one as an entry for next week, but we're gonna watch this for a few weeks and see if it puts in another decent opportunity. And now that we know this works really well on the weekly, we're going to be looking for a weekly entry. So I'd say at least 5 to 6 weeks before this one shapes up, but we'll keep an eye on it. And last, but potentially least, DXPE. This is a short idea. I liked the range on this one, but there's a few problems. I mean, there's gap. Not a big gap, but a gap here is really choppy. I mean, doesn't really trade smooth. I did like the range on this one, and really the entry would have been on this bar here, which would have been on Thursday. It would have been the lows with the highs on this pivot being the risk. And easy kind of like 2 to 3 R down on this pivot, but just not a fan of how this trades. I mean, it's really kind of overlapping, choppy, kind of blocky. It's not smooth. Usually you like to kind of like see waves, but like look at these 2 huge green bars here, and then look at this wild wick here, and then another wild wick here. I don't know. This one's not quite for me, but it was an idea I thought worthwhile to point out, and that's that. And that's the Sunday scan, guys. Thanks for sticking it out to the end. I really appreciate you watching. If any of this content helped you out in any way, please do me a huge favor and smash the like button. Hit subscribe if you want to get more content like this in the future. Click the bell if you want to get notifications anytime I post new content. It's a long weekend up here in Canada. Happy long weekend, May 24, to all the Canadians out there. I hope all of you are having a great trading month and year and week. Please be safe, trade well, trade with a plan, and we'll catch you on the next one.